Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to Global Atheist News Review. This is where my opinionated panel, ta-da, express their views on the news. And we're all over the place today. We've got Tercia from South Africa. Welcome, Tercia. Dr. Ty Wells from Tennessee, I think we decided.
Tennessee, yeah.
Yeah. Welcome, Ty. We've got Frank from neighboring Kentucky. Welcome, Frank. And we've got Esther from the Midlands of the UK. So it's a global event. Thank you very much for being members of my panel. So here's the first item that I'd like to get your thoughts about. The Taliban. You know, they don't like to be out of the news for very long. So this week they announced, in fact, it was their, listen to this, it was their Ministry for the Prevention of Vice and the Promotion of Virtue. Can you imagine such a ministry? Sounds a bit Orwellian. They announced that all women should have to cover their face in public. And they've done that before, but this time they've laid out an escalating set of punishments for anyone who refuses to comply. And the interesting thing is, it's not the woman that they want to punish, because, of course, women don't have any status in Pakistan. So the punishment starts with a woman's male guardian, that's normally the father, brother, or husband, being visited at home and given a ticking off by the Taliban officials. Then, if later a woman's appearance is still not acceptable, her male relative will be summoned to see the ministry officials in their offices. And further on down the road, he could be potentially jailed for 3 days or sent to court. This is because, of course, women are pets and you have to be responsible for them. What do you think of that? Don't all rush.
So one quick question. John Richards, did you say Pakistan or Afghanistan?
Oh, my mistake. Afghanistan.
Okay. I have a controversial take on this. Taliban is bad.
I don't think you get much argument here.
Oh, okay.
What is the population of Afghanistan?
Oh, good question. It's not that big. It's some millions. Let me just Google it. Talk amongst yourselves while I do this.
Well, I think it seems like it would be 8 or 10 million at least, but maybe not.
About 40 million people.
37.5 million.
That's a lot of people, and not all of them are, or maybe they are Muslim. I mean, that half of those, give or take, are women. So half that many have to be cover their face. I guess just look through the little.
With the littles.
And so if I and my wife visited, would my wife have to cover her face, or we face execution, or how does that work?
As an American there, yeah, I wouldn't recommend going. It would probably.
Oh no,
it's not a tourist destination.
Yeah, it's not the height of tourism right now.
This is very it's very disturbing. You think about the plight of women in these places. It's we can easily sit comfortably in our various countries and say, "Oh, it doesn't bother me. So why should I lend a voice here? It doesn't matter. My children aren't affected. I can go to sleep at night and wake up. But there are people's lives are being affected by this." These decisions and these things, and usually you would find that it is the least of the people that are affected. It is the women, the children, the infirmed, disabled. It's the people who are down on their luck already that are being affected by these decisions. I also think about Islam allowing a man to marry 4 wives, right? So think about it. If this man, that means one man would have responsibility over 4 women. He's got to make sure that his 4 women and maybe they have children who are girls. So you can imagine the responsibility, for this man who has four women. Some even marry more, even though they do say
Yeah.
Islam does not allow you. But I will tell you for a fact, that over in Africa, because I'm originally from Africa, there was a senator some years ago. A senator, he was on the spotlight because he wanted to marry a 13-year-old girl, and he said, there was uproar. People said, no, how can you want to take public office and be married to a 13, or want to marry a 13-year-old girl? And he said, if anyone can point out in his Quran where this is wrong, him marrying a 13-year-old girl, if anyone can point it out, then he will not go ahead with the marriage. But of course, no one could point it out. So he went ahead and he married this 13-year-old girl in 2010. This was in 2010. Now, this man has just purchased his application form. He's running for the post of president in Nigeria. Same man.
Wow. Yeah. Well, of course, Muhammad was caught marrying a 9-year-old, and the claim is that he didn't consummate the marriage until she was about 13. But I've had 2 wives, and my attitude
not at the same
men,
time. Not at the same
At the
time.
same time?
No. But my attitude towards men who have 4 is one of sympathy.
Yeah, but I at the same time, to think there's 10 to 15 million women that have to cover their faces when they go out,
Yeah,
or their husbands are the ones that may get the punishment, and they do that, I'm sure, in order so that it turns the husbands into face covering police in effect. Wow.
Yeah, and of course it discourages them from going out, so they're basically they're housebound. Yeah, and go ahead.
Covering the face is one thing, because I do know that there are actually Muslim women who feel that they don't necessarily have a problem with that, which is of course up to them. But the covering of the face is a symbol of the overall suppression, and it's not only against women, because remember this has implications for the brothers, the sons, in the relationships in the family. Imagine you're a widow. Let's take me for example. My youngest son is 15. He lives in the house with me, so he would have to take charge of it.
Yes.
If I do something wrong, he will have to bear the brunt of that. So
Yes.
it's not only women who's being suppressed. This is also a way to control men, and it's also a way to maintain control of interpersonal relationships, because
Yes.
like I said, you're now placing a child potentially in a situation where he has to take responsibility for his mother or his sister, who might be older than him. So it's just overall, it goes way deeper than just face coverings, because I have to confess that, I've gotten up on certain days when you have a really bad hair day. It's not such a bad idea to use a face cover.
Right.
The difference is you have choice. I can choose whether or not I want to.
Exactly.
And the point that I would like to make is men also suffer because of this. It's not only women that suffer.
I think this also leads on to honor killing, because these men then have the responsibility over these women, and when the women don't behave, when the women don't do what, then it is their duty to enforce the rules. And then you have the honor killings, the honor things they would then do to maintain the honor of their status quo, of
To
their
maintain control.
to maintain control. Exactly. So it's such a vicious circle, right? It leads from the women, then to the men, and then the men have the responsibility, and then there's the honor killing, and it just goes on and on and on. And at this point, I would have to say here, because I'm an ex-Christian, I would have to say here that you would find that some Christians will say, oh, at least Christianity is better. At least Christianity is not so bad. No, I beg to differ. Christianity says that the covering of a woman is the man, and the covering of a man is God. Even in Christianity, there's a hierarchy.
Yep.
And can you imagine, for the women, your covering, spiritual covering, with a head covering, is the man. So
Right.
if it's not your husband, then it's your father. If it's not your father, it's probably your uncle. But it's the man. The man is your covering. But the man's covering is God.
Above. Yes, yeah, him up there. Yes. Well, what they're doing is they're delegating the responsibility, aren't they? Instead of saying we're going to enforce this rule on half the population, the female half, they're saying to the men, it's your job, it's your responsibility. So they've got control over everyone.
So you see it as delegation. I see it as more of reinforcing a sense of bigotry, right? They are essentially empowering men to be even more cavalier with their judgment on women and control of women. And
or cruel.
And they're getting away with it by just letting them be more proactive and saying, hey, we will excuse you if you choose to, if necessary, kill your wife because she didn't follow the rules that we made up. Men, you're in charge. You're on our side. And it gives this impression that there's a circle of control that's shared. But honestly, I really like Esther's point. This maintenance of control just gets tighter and tighter over time. And it'll eventually exclude to a very few group of people. I am reminded of a group of comedians that I saw do a podcast where they were complaining. I promise I'll get straight to the point. Roe versus Wade, they were complaining how it wasn't a big issue because it was democratically elected officials who decided to get rid of it. So, like, what's the big problem? Are you arguing either way? They try to be independent, but really they're finding sophistry and making fun of everything. My problem is there's governments that are interested in serving people and protecting, like, women, children, infirm, disabled, being in their interest, being in the greatest interest of representing all the people that they are governing over. And then there's governance that's just interested about maintaining control and serving the interests of a very few select group of people. And that is currently the systems that we need to stray as far away from as possible. Because even if we have a democratically elected system or a system that takes power that is very interested in just that control aspect, it is not in service of the people and leads to greater harm, needless harm, and should be, in my opinion, fought against, removed, essentially, ideally by the people who are subject to it. But I honestly don't find those forms of government to be in any way valuable towards the greater, republic of human beings. I find that to be offensive, and I just wish they would get rid of them.
Well, that's the reason that they only exist in dictatorships. I mean, you'd never get elected on those policies, would you? This particular
America, right?
Yeah, we're facing some of that now.
Yeah. It was a fight.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, forgot that.
You're okay.
So there are other Muslims in Afghanistan who dispute the interpretation that a woman's appearance must be faceless. And of course, Apple's very against it because they spend a lot of money on FaceTime, so it's not going to work. So this particular Muslim, he says the face covering is a compulsory part of the religion. Only 1% of Afghan women at the moment are not already complying with the group's understanding of how they should dress. And he says this is not only the order of the Islamic Emirate, but the order of Allah.
That's said by a person, right? It's always that.
Yeah. That's Akif Muhajir.
This is actually relevant. What I want to say is relevant across for all the news that we plan to cover tonight, especially Roe versus Wade, which is a sweet little number, that one.
Yeah.
The main problem that I have with religious texts, and this concerns the Bible and the Quran, is that they are so open for interpretation. And if there's one thing that I think needs to be discussed with Christians and with Muslims, it is their texts. And I always use the example, if I leave a testament, a will and testament, I have 3 children. So I leave, and after my testament is read after my death, my 3 children have no clue. The one says, no, this chair belongs to me. And the other one says, no, but if you read here, this chair belongs to me. And the other one says, no, but if you read here, the chair belongs to me. Whose fault is that fight? The responsibility for that fight lies with me. It's not my children's fault that the testament that I left is causing conflict between them. It's my fault because I didn't clearly communicate. And that's the one thing about these religions based on holy texts, is that they're so open to interpretation, while at the same time coming from above, So my interpretation is right because that's what Allah says.
Yeah.
But Allah says the next Muslim doesn't have to have his face, the woman's face doesn't have to be covered. So who's right?
Yes.
Both of them?
Exactly. I don't.
That's the problem.
Yeah, I don't know whether you guys are familiar with David Copperfield, the novel written by Charles Dickens. Well, he uses that device because David is working for, I can't remember the man's name, and he asks him for a raise, or a rise in the UK, raise in America. And the employer says, well, I'd be very, very willing to give you a raise, but Mr. Jorkins in the back office here, he's a very hard man. He won't he wouldn't consider letting you have more money. And that's what they're doing. They've got their hard man up in the sky.
That's it.
Can I add a little bit to this too? Like, let's look at the analogy where if they said, okay, if you're a Christian, you have to wear a cross or you'll go to jail. Like if you're going down the streets and you're a Christian, you have to wear that cross. And what it does is 2 things. One, if you're in a family of people who are Christian and you're an atheist, personally, you can't express that. You have to, because you'd be, outcast by your family. You just made the barrier of being a reasonable thinker even harder, or an outspoken reasonable thinker. And all it does is just continue to mass society in this like one idea that we're all the same, that we all abide by the same principles. When in fact, no, you're just doing it by fear and oppression. You're basically charging family members to be the narcs within families, households, and there's no sanctuary for you to finally be expressing about other kind of religious beliefs that those are attracted to, or at least getting rid of all of them if you find them all to be insubstantial in terms of their evidence. It's just a really terrible situation.
Certainly is.
And applicable not just outside of Afghanistan, but where we are now today globally in the future, in the past, but truly, hopefully, where we should stray away from as we continue to promote critical thinking as a group.
Yeah. Historically, there's so many civilizations that have made women second-class citizens, and we need to get enlightened.
For myself, who loves makeup, and just love the idea of a woman just having that little bit of something on the face. If my heart breaks, it might not be much, it might not be anything, but I think of, and some of the women that come from these places have very exotic skin. They've got very beautiful texture of their skin and their hair, and to think all of that has to be hidden. All of that has to be put away. Why? So that a man doesn't get tempted.
Right.
So that a man does not get an erection. They put the onus on the woman to cover herself, because men cannot control their desires.
So
That's
they
a shame.
I don't want to, sorry, John, go continue. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to tell a little anecdote, because I was in, I think, a railway carriage with a Muslim woman, and her family, and she was completely shrouded facially. But you should have seen her hands. They were immaculately made up, beautiful nails, and every possible manicure aspect had been performed because she wanted to display her beauty. Why not?
Right. And it's
But have the
also
freedom to do that.
it's such a flimsy response for like, hey, we don't want to give men unnecessary erections. Like anyone who said that hasn't ever been a man, because that's all men get all the time. There's nothing it's not ever happening. But I'm also
we don't need help. Right?
Yeah. It's also to reinforce the totem pole in terms of importance, where it's like, hey, guy, you have nothing in your life. You're working a dead end job. Maybe your family doesn't like you, but guess what? If you subscribe to this system, you're better than all the other women, which is 20 million other people that live in this country. Think about that. That's pretty good. It's just a terrible system that reinforces this hierarchy that should be getting rid of, in my opinion.
Well, I'd like to say that Ty's views are his own, and and speaking personally, it's all a memory for me. You know, it's all that sort of erections. What are they? I can't remember.
We'll probably when we get, I don't want to take too much time, but I do think that this is something that needs to be unpacked, and it really does touches upon the other news items, like I said, Roe versus Wade, as well as the journalist killed in Israel. The irony of the suppression of women in various ways is that every single piece of sociological research indicates that if you empower women, you empower societies.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm by no means a feminist because I'm very comfortable in my identity as a woman, and I don't need to compete against men as such. So I'm very ambivalent about claiming to be a feminist. I much rather prefer to be a humanist. And the facts show that because women are the primary caretakers, if you empower a woman, you empower a nation.
Yes.
The academic abilities of children improve if the mother is educated.
Yes.
So it's this deep ironic thing that these societies that keep on suppressing women are shooting themselves in the foot as a society. It's like literally cutting society's nose to spite society's face. And that's so sad. And what people don't realize, and Esther, you touched upon that when you said that, oh, this is in Afghanistan. What does Afghanistan have to do with me? I mean, really, I'm sitting in the southern end of Africa. We have other problems here. It's none of my business what happens to women in Afghanistan. But if you think within the context that if you disempower women, you disempower an entire society. That society becomes unstable. It's more prone to violence. And violence that happens on a large enough scale in a place like Afghanistan can have massive rollover effects on me sitting here in South Africa, because everything is so interconnected economically, socially. And you have Pakistan just next door, and you have India. And maybe that's a good segue into the next news item.
Yeah, we're going to do India, yes.
The violence between Hindus and Muslims. It's so easy for us to say, people sitting in the UK or in the United States, or me in South Africa, what does that have to do with me?
Yes.
But what happens in India has an effect on what happens in my country. Not directly, but indirectly, because of our interconnectedness. Everything that happens has a, and the trouble is, we don't even always know how to begin to measure those rollover effects. We can't foresee all the implications of what happens in another country.
Yeah, we want women to be more in places of power, as long as they're not iron ladies like Margaret Thatcher.
One last two sentences. Whenever I see choices being taken away from women in the form of governance, I see a government that is not reflective of enough powered women. And I find that to be weird that we have a word for what feminist is, when in my head it's anti-bigotry. And I am always willing to fight against that. I feel like it's a weird concept to have a name for wanting for life to be better for people who are marginalized. Like, why does that need to have a term? We should all be fighting against what is a clear evil, what is a clear bad thing. I don't know. Maybe I can work on that verbiage a little better, but yeah.
And thanks, Tercia, for the segue. We are now going to India, where a group of young men clad in the saffron scars of Hindu nationalist groups and waving swords and pistols in the air assembled in front of a mosque that was holding evening prayers during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. The men shouted abusive slogans, blared music from loudspeakers, and refused to leave. Angry Muslims in the mixed faith neighborhood then began hurling rocks, and a massive street fight ensued that was only subdued when riot police flooded the neighborhood. Now, this is every year this happens. It's the Hanuman procession. But this year, they made a point of processing past this mosque and shouting, Jai Shri Ram, which means glory to Lord Ram, their god, the Hindu god, one of them. And they did this. The Muslim shopkeepers said they've gone further and further just to provoke us. So that's what's going on between Hindus and Muslims in India. What do you think of that?
Can I jump in here? This might sound frivolous, but I think there's value in it. You know, my dad, he's now 73, he used to be a devout Christian, but then he's deconverted now, but he's a keen watcher of rugby. Now, I don't know whether the chaps in Kentucky and Tennessee, respectively, whether you're familiar with the sport of rugby. It's not like football and it's not soccer. It's quite a violent a game. John and Esther,
it's the sport where you're rolling up rugs, right? And then there's bees afterwards. We know about it.
I missed that, but I always so my dad now, he says rugby is his religion now, because Friday afternoon till Saturday evening late, he watches one match after the other, national, international, local, and I always watch it's young men play rugby, and in South Africa it's our national sport, and it's very violent.
It is.
I'm of the opinion that if more countries in the world played more rugby, there would be much less violence of all sorts in the world. Because this thing about young men marching, if they weren't marching to proclaim that their God is the better, stronger God, they would probably be proclaiming that the Red Devils are better than than Liverpool. I'm not into UK soccer, but there's a deep psychology, and once again, it's all our worst attributes as humans come to the forth because of religion. You know, if you have your favorite soccer team and you go against one another, there's an element of play in there. It can get serious. I mean, you know that. But if you know, most soccer fans know, or most rugby supporters know, it's a game, and the percent who lose it, they lose it and they get in trouble. But when it comes to religion, it's the same mentality that you have with my soccer team versus your soccer team.
Yes.
But now you are not doing it on behalf of my soccer team. You are doing it on behalf of the creator of the universe.
Yes.
And therefore you cannot change your mind. You have to go with this, because I mean, we know young men, we know what they like. It's a phase. It's that they. So let's just promote rugby the world over. What do you guys say about that?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Letting young men who are very often angry, get rid of their fight intention in a sport where there's rules. The trouble with religious conflicts is there's no rules.
I think I like where this is going, because I've been asked questions like, so as an atheist, what do you propose? What do you suggest we get rid of religion? if you get rid of religion, what are people going to do? People who need religion to be good. They need religion to have morals. You know, some people cannot see a world that exists without religion. It's just not possible in
Go
their
to Denmark.
radar. And so I think just listening to you speak there and about sports, you know, for me, when I left Christianity, it was a big struggle. Uh, I felt like I'd lost my identity because religion was everything to me. You know, it was all it's like everything about me was, you know, intertwined with this God. And so it was like trying to find meaning and trying to find myself. Who am I now that I don't believe in this God? And I started thinking, okay, I cannot associate with anybody who is religious. I don't want them as friends. I don't want them as anything. I just, you know, I started to drift away from these people. I started looking for atheist only groups, atheist only people, atheist only everything. And I realized, okay, no, I'm limiting myself here. I can be an atheist and still function in a secular, very, you know, it was a real, uh, um, you know, a change of mindset. And I spoke to someone and they said to me, you don't have to only engage in atheist only everything. You know, you're limiting yourself. You know, if
Yeah.
you're looking for groups, just any group. You know, you don't, the group you join doesn't have to be about religion. It could be, they said, you know, join a sewing group, a knitting group, you know, just anything. You know, it doesn't have to be atheism only, because that's all I was after. I didn't want to engage with anyone who's going. I didn't want to hear about Jesus. Didn't want to hear about Allah. Just don't bring it anywhere near
That's
me.
why you're now a humanist
Yes,
and a training to become a humanist celebrant. Absolutely.
that's right.
Yeah. Well, we all know what young men are like. In fact, only today we heard that one young man somewhere in America had run amok, 18 years old, got a gun and killed 10 people in a shop. Was it? Tell us about that, Frank. Did you hear that item of news?
Yeah, it was in a grocery store, right? I heard. I don't know all the details, but yes, it was done with an assault rifle.
Yeah.
I can't explain it.
No. Well, young men do have anger, and giving them a gun is the last thing you should be doing. Yeah.
But,
Okay.
You know, but when I was being raised, my parents didn't try to discourage me from being angry at times because it was the appropriate reaction. But they did teach me, and maybe this is where parents widespread aren't doing it. They did teach me that if you're mad at Joe, you don't take it out on Sam or Mary or Charlie. You know, and yet this kid, 18-year-old, killed people he didn't even know.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I just can't fathom that.
No, that's just crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Well, the thing is, in India, the situation has been getting worse since Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his BJP party. I think the P of BJP means party. So if I say BJP party, I'm being tautological. So I won't. I'll say and his BJP. He has links to the Hindu nationalist groups, which are the aggressive groups that are involved in these clashes. So they're his electorate. He doesn't try to diffuse the tensions, and that gives these mobs a sense of impunity. So this is not quite being underwritten, but it's being overlooked by government.
Yeah.